Welcome to the Shifting People podcast, where we go deep into the weeds with leaders on the front lines of people management in the service industry. We interview the best minds in HR and talent acquisition, along with owner-operators, franchisees, and general managers to bring you real insights that you can actually apply in your business today. I'm your co-host, Derek Williamson.
And I'm Kathleen McDonough, and it's time to get to work. And today we have Connie Beal from United Way's Working Bridges. Welcome, Connie. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me. Hi, it's great to be here with you.
Hello.
Hello.
And so for anyone who doesn't know what Working Bridges is, can you tell them a little bit about who you are and then what Working Bridges does?
Yeah, I would love to give an intro and share what this work is. United Way's Working Bridges is an employer partnership, a relationship with employers, a partnership that supports employee retention, advancement, and financial stability, where we design strategies with our business partners to support employees where they're at. We have a team of resource coordinators that go into workplaces and help employees to be able to show up to work, to stay well at work, to advance in their jobs. And they do that by navigating community resources and helping people with the things that help them show up, like housing and transportation and food and childcare, and being able to have resources and information that help them with their financial goals. The team is in Northern Vermont right now. So we operate a program called Working Bridges Alliance between United Way of Northwest Vermont and Green Mountain United Way. In time, we'll be in the South. That's really keep expanding and growing this work over, we're almost at 20 years now. And it's amazing how it's grown to be able to work with employees in all sorts of jobs, from manufacturing to healthcare positions, higher ed, childcare, hospitality. We've had some experience with restaurants. It's really about helping people where they are. And we spend so much time working and being at work. It only makes sense to go to work and help people where they are most of the time. We have a team they're trained as community resource specialists. They are mental health first aiders and trained financial coaches. So they are the Jack and Janes of all trades, generalists, and work to bridge people to the supports that are communities, sometimes very local resources that we can navigate, but sometimes we're interacting with more state or federal resources, and sometimes working with employees just to maximize the employer-sponsored benefits that may be available to them, that really are added resources, and we want them to have information and access to. And why United Way? We're here because United Way sits at the intersection of cross-sector collective partnership, right? We want people to work together and bring their resources and assets to bear so that we can figure out these hard challenges that we all face. And that is a lot of the work of Working Bridges, working across sectors and being able to really, in partnership, help our workforce sustain and thrive.
Yeah. Before I met you and I knew about Working Bridges, I had no idea that Working Bridges helped in so many ways with so many important things. And you mentioned rough categories of like how you help workers, right? So with mental health needs and transportation and housing and childcare and whatnot. Can you give a couple examples of ways you've supported and helped workers in those scenarios?
Oh, definitely. And really, it's such a wide spectrum and anyone that hires and supports employees understands that we're individuals and we come with all sorts of things happening in our lives. And some examples to really help fill in those lines. I think employees sometimes will meet with their resource coordinator to search for rental units. We have a workforce shortage in our region, and finding rental units that are also affordable or that meet the financial constraints certainly is a challenge and can create some hardships for employees who really if they don't have a place to stay. Sometimes we've had employees who've experienced bouts of houselessness or homelessness, and so helping them to navigate shelter services or supports or emergency housing. But we also work with employees who they're working and they see home ownership as a goal, and they're like, how do I get started? What's my path to home ownership as a first-time homeowner? And so really meeting employees based on where they're coming from is part of the role. And so to do that, it might look like helping with paperwork. It might be education or supporting people in making a connection with a local provider or partner who is that expert. It might mean like an example around supporting employees with their mental health. I think while we're not mental health counselors, we work very closely with employee assistance programs and local community mental health supports to navigate those moments when employees show us that they're ready for that support or that they invite us in. Really, maybe a less common example might be like we've had employees. I think because we get to see the employees regularly, and we have that sort of over time, we get to see them and walk through the workplace with them. So we can identify some behavior changes, or we might get that invitation to ask the questions. How are you doing today? What's going on? And just thinking of an example from when I started this work as a resource coordinator, an employee who I saw over time, I saw that he was coming to work and his behavior changed. He was very tired. Someone who had a lot of light in his eyes and was super spirited started to show just was really down and sitting on a bench in the hallway by where the employee entrance is. He sat next to me and I was like, I've noticed you're changed over time here. Are you what's going on? And I was able to get him support with his employee assistance program. He had a mental health assessment. It was very clear he needed emergency help. He wasn't safe and he had disclosed thoughts of suicide and needed that connection right away. And so in order to do that, we were able at that point to connect to his team, his HR partner at the site. The company got him a ride to the hospital, got him safe. I know it's an extreme situation, but I think ultimately those mental health first aiders, right, having that as part of our toolkit allows for us to have conversation that might be safer because an employee doesn't have to disclose that to their colleagues. They don't have to disclose that to their boss. They can speak to someone who they know is a safe, confidential person to let that happen and to navigate those services and supports. Other thoughts that I think can come up are a lot of times resource coordinators are working with employees who are experiencing some deep benefit cliffs. So like our team thinks a lot about the impact of public benefit cliffs as our partners or business partners. They do the right thing and they're doing the right thing really well, raising wages, benefiting their employees, really bringing in some robust employee benefits in their workplace. And I think where we sit, sometimes employees, depending on their household size, the situations happening in their home and their family, they may lose significant benefits as they grow and advance in their job. And we don't want people parked. That's the piece that's really important is economic advancement, mobility. We're meant to grow in our jobs. There are folks who want to grow in those jobs and we want to support that, right? That initiative is so important. And the key part is what do we do in that space? How do we support an employee who, now they got this wage increase, but their housing subsidy now goes away. What can we do in that space to support some stability so they can continue to grow and thrive and get into this new normal? Some of that is financial coaching. Some of that is supporting someone to adjust to that normal. But sometimes that takes time, right? And it might mean working with your resource coordinator to get some food help in that time so that you can shift your expenses elsewhere. It might mean accessing a small dollar unmet need grant that we've been able to develop through our community giving. We can bring that to bear when there are unmet needs. And when that employee can't get help elsewhere because they earn too much and they're doing well, we can step in because money and earned income isn't always the one metric that determines someone's well-being. And we know that there's so many other resources that come to bear in our own individual lives. Like sometimes I ask groups, and this is funny, I do this in groups and when I want folks to expand their thoughts around what does it really take to show up at work. And I'll say, okay, let's just take a minute and in your mind, ask yourself, what did I require? What resources did I require today in order to show up at this meeting or to show up to this podcast or to turn? And people will say, immediately they'll say coffee. That always hits the list first. But I hear things like childcare. I needed technology. I needed this darn laptop to work or this phone to work, or I needed to know that I had a safe place to sleep and that I had good sleep. I needed to know that I could manage the physical demands of entering the space to be at this meeting, that I didn't have to have a flight of stairs ahead of me, or that I had transportation, that I had all of these tools and resources that at the end of the day, we all rely on. These are as much workforce infrastructure needs as they are basic needs, and as they are like just as human beings. These are things that are so important to us. So taking stock of that, and how do we get those things? Is it that we're given these things? No, we work really hard for these things. And not all of us start our lives having access to these things, right? So it's like I spend time with a lot of our partners really thinking about the mental models that we bring into our workplace, right? Into a work setting. And when we're in the position of hiring or keeping our employees and helping them thrive, a lot of times I myself have to check my own mental model. It's the last story. I think this was a lesson I learned early in the work. Was an employee, actually, the employer partner called me and said, "Hey, I'm really worried about this employee. We've got to figure out a car or transportation. Like, clearly, we have to get them in a vehicle." And I said, "Let me check in with them when I get there." Because what I learned in that interaction was the employee was walking 1 mile to work from the bus stop, the bus stop stopped a mile away from the company. And so the employer was concerned and said, there are no sidewalks. It's dark. It's getting cold. It's Vermont. And so I heard that and I was like, yeah, I'll check in. And fast forward till the next day, probably when I talked to that employee, I remember saying, hey, so you're walking into work. How's it going for you? Do you want to talk about transportation resources? Because you're coming in early. It's dark out. It's cold. What do you need right now? And he said to me, transportation. And I was like, yeah, I just want to make sure you can get back and forth to work and safely. And he's, oh, no, I love it. It's how I stay in recovery. And I said, huh, then carry on. Anything else we should talk about? In that moment, my mental model just exploded. And I went back to my partner and I was like, hey, like, this is a moment of learning right now. What is good for the people? What was our approach here? Our approach was, oh, to work here, of course you have to have a vehicle. No. I mean, it shifted how we thought about helping people, because it wasn't up to it when organizations and companies design their policies, practices, approaches from very specific narrow mental model. We're missing the opportunity to meet people where they are and let people get what they need to be well and thrive. So agency, dignity in work, let your people be and do what they need. And really, I think, bridge them to the opportunities and the options. But there's never one size fits all. And mental models really are worth examining. You could call it, I don't know, people might call it lenses or judgments or preconceived notions, things that we don't often check. They're like unconscious. We have no idea what's going on in there most of the time in our brains. I'm pointing to my head right now. So we don't know what's happening in there. But
Right.
it's important for us to stop a minute and say, oh, why did we make it that way? Who was thinking about it? And what did we leave out? Or what other perspective has not been included here? Because we're missing an opportunity if we don't examine that.
No kidding. And I'm playing out in my head how a scenario like that might have gone without a partnership like this, if the employer was just trying to handle it on their own. And like you mentioned, there's already a barriered conversation between an employer and an employee, and what you can ask and how, and maybe they're not comfortable sharing that they're in recovery. And I have to ask, in general, this is as you're describing it, I'm thinking like, why is every employer not using the working with you, especially in the sectors where traditionally employees are very unsupported? Just before we got on here, we were talking about like Google or Apple or whatever, right? They just pour money into things, and I'm sure they still have gaps because it's still an employer, but those traditionally are not actually the sectors where people are most vulnerable and most susceptible to, if you have enough income, you can childcare and all those things, and you can work from home and all these other things. It's very different if you have to physically get to work, if all these other challenges. So I'm curious, like, what prevents employers from working with you, or is it an awareness thing? Obviously, one of the reasons we wanted to do this was to share that awareness, but Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love to know more.
Thanks for that question, Derek. It is that. I think that there are probably multiple things coming to play in that. And part of it is probably one, not knowing, just out of not understanding or knowing or not being able to make that connection. And that we can work on. I think another challenge for our program and just being able to serve employees and grow the program is that we do rely on fee for service, and not every company will have capacity or financial resources to contribute that portion of our program. That is why I think we're working mostly with mid to larger employers in Vermont, and that's been a really not so much. I think it's mostly a shortage of our imagination and opportunity for creation. It's not necessarily a barrier. It's really just, I see that as that's the next iteration, is cracking the pricing model on how we work with our small businesses so that our program can cover costs and do the thing, but package it in a way for our small business partners, and to connect in ways that are meaningful for those industries that we're not yet there and or that we have yet to sustain. One area, I think there are going to be industries perhaps that do need philanthropy or that need more, that will need a little more. So I think of our childcare sector, family home childcare providers and center care. There's such little margin there that we will likely to work with that workforce and that sector. We're going to need to leverage funding in other ways. So I get that's the beauty of the work, is we can leverage funding, right? This is the thing, is we can figure this out. It's just a bit of a puzzle. Like, how do we want to get there? What is it we're trying to do? What are our shared goals? So it's not that it's a barrier, it's an opportunity here where I think it's going to take the right partners and opportunities. We have some experience in our past where we've worked with small companies. We have some ideas about what works and what doesn't. So it's in these last almost 20 years, I think we've got enough information now where we could probably package something that actually could function and work. And so it's really a matter of, I think, the convening of it, like figuring that out. I think the last part I'll say, certainly, I think economic conditions impact everyone. And I think I see that with our program, like our just understanding the economic conditions and the impact that it may have on different sectors and different industries, different businesses. They're complex communities within themselves, right? They have their own funding challenges and business challenges. And so much of this is ultimately a business decision, but it's also within the context of where we are right now as a society and a community. And I recognize that can play a role. And I recall just thinking back to, even what's interesting though, even when the economy changes, this work continues to expand, grow, sustain. We've had years, even when I think back to the recession of 2008, where I remember the team thinking, this may be it. We don't know. Things are hard. Like, this is going to be an interesting time. But it just peeled back that onion, and it helped the community to see, wow, we really need to do something. We were able to every year we've been able to grow. And I don't understand. I think that tells me something about, even when something ends, that opens other doors, and this work just grows where it needs to grow. Yeah. It's like water. Water goes where it needs to go.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And I
you
think part of it is,
Derek just drank a cup of water, and that's why I was like, water. I should hydrate
Constantly
more.
drinking water. Just, oh, yes, good cue.
do you know that it's water in that cup though? It could be coffee, it could be anything. We don't know.
I know. This is coffee. We'll go for the coffee.
Definitely coffee. It's funny that you mentioned that, because it sounds like, although you haven't maybe packaged it
Mm.
to appeal to small businesses, right? Any business, from any industry or any size, right? So a small business could come to you and want to work with you, and you'd figure out a way to do it. Whether
Oh,
they don't have enough to pay your fees, you figure out the gap. Or if they do, but what I'm sure it's
yeah.
not a one size fits all fee, right? Like, you'd
Yeah.
figure out a fee that fits them and their needs. So I think it's cool that, so then the access, or letting people know about it, will then have small businesses come to you. You'll figure it out. You'll naturally come up with a sort of package then that can help even more people.
Yeah. And one of the things lately we've been focused on, because of the changes that will be implemented around qualified health plans through Vermont, Health Connect, our state marketplace, and Medicaid changes, so health insurance changes, right? That will impact small businesses in significant ways. And so what our program is doing, which is new for us, we're building a virtual training session around weathering this challenge with your employees as small businesses that may rely on those qualified health plans to help their employees have health insurance. We want good information getting out the doors. Bare minimum, we want to give our small business community the opportunity to learn about these changes, the impacts that they may see with their workforce, and what can be done, what's needed. We want to have that dialogue. And in that is an opportunity for us to understand the needs and be responsive. So I think that's happening in November. So we're excited about that. That really, it's our first external, like really external offering that Working Bridges. Typically, we work with the partners that we currently work with. So we're more of a closed network, but this is a chance for us to really share what we know, because we know Vermont has a lot of small business partners and we really want to reach them. We want them supported, right? We want those employees supported. So that's coming. But it's like training education is also another piece that we can offer. And sometimes that is where opportunity is for our smallest, for the person that does it all, the employee or the owner who is also business manager and running the machines and hiring, and it's like doing all the things. They're the trusted person at that company. And they're the ones who can support that navigation. So how are we helping them? What is it that could be of support to that person who's in that unique and challenging role where the boundaries may be blurred and it may be hard to support your employees when you're as close as you are? And so what can we do in that space to really give, to help community show up for those small businesses? Because that's what this is making sure that our employers and our employees workplace is a community within a community. And so when we support that workplace community, it's community showing up within that community, like being part of those, being in there that's powerful. It's, I don't know, it's like community. Wait, I'm trying to think of it. It's double the community times two. I'm trying to think of a tagline here. I don't know, but it's having double the resource. It's like you've got your employer community, and people take care of each other in their workplaces. Some workplaces, some organizational cultures really do support each other in ways that are really unique and healthy and awesome. And then there are some places where that doesn't happen, and maybe where asking for help is seen as some kind of, as like a weakness, right? Or there's stigma. And so it's interesting. I think we want to go to the workplaces where maybe it's hard for people to ask for help. That's where we want to be. We want to be where folks are like needing that piece, like looking for that support in shifting a culture to one where asking for help is seen as strength, and as this is how we're gonna grow and develop ourselves, right? And build some resilience, right? By being able to like move through hard things and celebrate each other when we do, right?
Yeah.
When that happens, that's when I'm like, I'm out. Or I'm like, it's so good, I gotta go. I'm
Well,
like, oh my gosh, you guys have achieved some amazing moment. There are moments like that. Like some of the partners we get to work with, we get to, I wish I could share all the successes, because I've seen a lot of those. I've seen companies grow through things together and struggle, but then adjust and develop. And it's really fun to see that as from an organizational development perspective and culture. What builds culture? And that is part two of the thing, because we're going to have a whole session on that.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much on culture, which all ties together here. I have one thought and then one follow-up question. It is interesting, right? Like this space, it was I came from, I used to run an ice cream store, and then Kathleen and I worked together at a tech company. It's so
Yeah.
interesting because in tech and in these like knowledge work jobs, having a one-on-one with your manager once a week or once every few weeks is standard practice. And not every company does this, but there's a difference between a tactical one-on-one and like a one-on-one, let's talk about you. And I only just realized, put that together. I wish I did that when I had an ice cream store in a different way because it's shift work. And so you've got your staff are showing up very different times. But when you have deliberate time, when an employee shows up and they know this is my time to talk about the thing that's been hanging over my head for weeks, it
Yes.
prevents so many problems because you can get to them. But that's, yeah, I think for many industries, that's the level we're at still, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my question, I guess, too, was even before working with your organization, if you were listening to this as an employer who knows that they want to invest more in their people, they want to help solve some of the bigger problems that prevent them from being able to come to work or show up like completely or be present, whatever it is, or just like they just see the overall value of investing in like their employees.
Yeah.
Where do you think employers should start? Where's the low-hanging fruit isn't maybe the right word, but where do you often see like some big gaps that are not that hard for employers to
Yeah.
get started on and move in the direction?
Yeah. I think I have some thoughts about this. Even as we've worked with some of our smaller companies anyway, I can think back to, especially when we begin, sometimes we do have, when we launch, we have those conversations about what are some of the things you're doing? What are you seeing with your workforce? Like that initial conversation is one of assessment. We're both trying to understand like what's happening and what are some of the hardships that you're facing with the employees you hire, you have. What are you seeing? And what are some of the approaches you've tried? What are the things that are currently happening? What direction are you moving in? What do benefits look like? So doing a bit of an analysis around benefits, not an, it sounds, it's a conversation. What's working? Who's benefiting from the benefits and who's not showing up and what are your goals around that? So some things we look for are, do you have, I'll just start naming things that come to mind, but do you have an employee assistance program? And what is covered in that? Does it have free counseling sessions or is it purely a phone number somewhere? What's the utilization rate? What are you learning through that engagement? What are your concerns and challenges around open enrollment? Tell me about your health insurance. What are the struggles or challenges around healthcare and healthcare access that your employees may or may have that you've become aware of? Tell me about 401k utilization. I want to know who's saving, who's not saving, and does it fry your no, tell me more. What's going on? Do you have internal strategies you've designed? What kinds of internal benefits or programs have you decided are important? For example, an employer we work with, they have an internal grant program to support their employees. Do you have what's called an employer small dollar loan? These are small dollar loans that an employer can host for their employees in partnership with a local credit union or bank. These small dollar loans are credit builder loans. These are loans that create access for some employees who may be unbanked or have had credit repair needs and they're not going to be able to get other kinds of loans. It can be paid back through payroll deduction and it stays on and builds savings. So this tool that's another benefit for financial wellness at work strategies. And that's the question. What does financial wellness at work look like for your company? Where are employees getting that resource? Because when you get a paycheck, earned income is a key resource, right? We've got to talk about that. That is a huge resource. As a direct service professional who has worked with populations who do not have earned income is a game changer when it comes to financial capability and advancement and opportunity. And so that space right there, we can do a lot with. So do you provide financial coaching? Our employees, are they coming to you with tax questions? Do your employees know what tax withholding is? Maybe I should back up. Do you know what tax withholding is? Because what are the systems and resources that your employees have to navigate? Tell me about your employees. What are the demographics? I want to understand because that will inform the kinds of information and resources that could be shared. And At bare minimum is making sure partners understand how to share the basics of community resources. Do you have information or a relationship with 211? Are you sharing information about some of those local resources that mean something to your population, right? That help them connect. Those are those are the things that community can do right now, right? Those don't cost a thing. It's just about getting connected and engaged in your own community. So you can start sharing that with your people, right? And I think that in my mind is maybe the very first part of making sure that we're supporting employees where they are.
Yeah. Your all these questions, right, are part of your assessment, and
Yeah.
these themselves are so important, regardless of the work you do and helping after that. But just this is so important because they're great to uncover, like, benefits that an employer can list in a job description or explain it in interviews or even just list it on an internal server or resource or a cork board where for employees who don't know about them, right? So
Yeah.
you're helping the employer uncover what they may not even realize are benefits and then get them to their or get the help their current employees realize that they have them. And
Yeah.
that in itself is extremely important for a small employer. And then I'm thinking a question for you is, what if you described the scenario of an employer who is doing a million things, right? They're hiring, they're running payroll, they're running the business, they're running everything. What if the answer to all of these questions, they're listening right now, the answer to all these questions is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know we have something, but I don't know what it is, or I'm not sure. And then I'm just thinking there's probably so many businesses that don't reach out, know there may be services like yours, but don't
Yeah.
reach out because they're maybe embarrassed
Yeah.
about not knowing what they offer and what they don't offer. They know they So how do you break that barrier? What would you say to someone who is nervous to even reach out to you because they don't know the state of the
You
health
don't have to
resources they
know.
provide?
I think part of that is just as we meet employees where they're at, we're going to meet you where you're at. Like, you're a company, you're doing what you do. And at the end of the day, when I work with an employer and they are manufacturing food or their business is something I can't, don't you dare ask me to figure out what you're doing. That is why we're here. Come and talk with
Yep.
us and we will figure out what kinds of solutions and opportunities there are, but don't ask me to stand on the line, right? I've some employees have asked me before, they're like, "You got the hairnet on. Why don't you just come on and pack a box?" I'm like, "That will ruin your quality ratings, and let's not even talk about safety." I don't need to know all the things about the company, and that is your expertise, and we wanna be there to support where you have those moments of, "You know what? I don't know the answer, but go talk to that resource coordinator. Go figure it out. That's why they're here. Let's get you connected." And so I guess that's the takeaway there. That is, it's almost, I want to like relieve companies of that feeling of I should know these things, because that's when we hire resource coordinators, it takes a good year of in-service work and learning for them to get this job, like to really show success and impact. I really need a year of time to see them get into this work in a way that I'm like, now they get it. Now they're really cooking full steam. If it takes me a year to train someone on the job fully and get them their certification in this work, don't try it. Don't even give yourself that stressor. Let's take that right off. And you connect with folks who are doing this work daily, navigating these ever changing conditions. It's not upon any singular person either. The other thought I have on that too, Kathleen, was I think it's so easy for us to want to, when things are hard, it's easy for us to point fingers and say, "Well, if you only did that, and if only we did this." It's not an if only. There's no singular entity that is going to solve our system problems. Okay? Our systems are challenged, and it is not because of you, but it is therein our solution lies. It is not, it is, yeah, you start pointing and bring everyone together and be like, we will figure this out. That's the solution. So like none of this rests on the shoulders of a singular company or a singular business owner. It is why we operate as a collective, because every employer in our space that comes to know us has some perspective to bring and will help us design the thing that helps employees. And that's like at the root of this work every year. It's about innovation, right? It's not a program that's meant to just be. This program continues to iterate and find those solutions because every year we've got changes and our employees' needs change, our business needs change. It's so dynamic. So, yeah, I guess the takeaway there is we put that heavy stuff down. Let's work together toward a solution that so you don't have to hold that expectation as a company. People will look to you. That's the thing. Your employees are going to look to you for the answers. And so you can say, I don't know, but I'm going to go find the answer. Go do that. So that feels more fair in
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
world. Yeah.
And it's funny that you say, I don't know, but I'm gonna go find the answer.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of employers when they might say that to their employees, but then
Yeah.
wish, okay, I wish there was someone I could go to. Or I wish that I didn't have to be the one to do it feels like your program will be that so the employer doesn't have to say, I know you have a problem and I don't know the answer, but I will go find it. They can go to you, or you
Yes.
might even be there before intercepting so that they don't have to be in that situation of saying, "I don't know the answer." It's
Yeah.
you they're going to with the employee is going to with the problem instead of the employer, which then
Yeah.
takes the load off of the employer also. And
So much like what you just said sounds so much about it's so much about boundary setting, right? Like it's and this is not like boundaries as in hard boundaries, I don't want to talk to you. It's boundaries as, hey, healthy boundaries in a space so that we all get what we need. And it's what I see, it gives some of our partners some bandwidth back, like capacity back to help their people because we work a lot directly with our HR partner, right? Like the human resources partner gets into HR because they want to help people. That's what they're doing. They're like the
they can.
helpers.
Yeah.
Our HR person here, yeah, they do all the things
Yeah.
and they're pretty amazing. They don't want to deliver a, I don't know, I can't help you. There's nothing that I can do. That's not adequate for an HR person. They want to know that their people are well cared for, that there's information here we can
Yeah.
provide.
Yeah.
I think of that, yeah, like, it's give your HR person some capacity to do the thing that they know they love, which is, I'm gonna I'm gonna take my trusted relationship with you, employee, and I'm gonna walk you down and connect you with this person, and I'm gonna pass the trust I have to this person.
Yeah.
And now that employee can take it from there, and that HR person can say, "Okay, that person has what they need, and I feel confident they can get that information." Yeah.
Absolutely. I think HR people just naturally are very and it's weird because the stigma is like that HR people there's a negative stigma, right? But I think you're right. They got into this work because they want to help people. They love people, they want to help them, and they also have a knack for maybe like numbers and organizational things. And so think one challenge for that HR people face that you hit the nail on the head with is when employees come to them and they need help with something. I'm thinking of your example of the person or similar-ish example, maybe someone can't get to work, their
Yeah.
car broke down
Yeah.
and it's totaled, whatever.
Yeah.
How do I figure that out? And as an HR person, they might be thinking like, "I don't have a car to give them. I don't know how I can bridge that gap in their transportation other than give them a bus pass." I think there's, like,
Yeah.
small solutions that, like, they might look at their company's list of
Yeah.
benefits or programs that their company has, and in many scenarios, not see a solution. And
Yeah.
because the HR person does not have the resources of the community that your team does, right? They don't know that there's a small business assistance grant or hardship
Yeah.
loan that person could they don't naturally realize that, and it's not their job to know all about that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like opening up this whole other world to employees of things that might not be
Yes.
already listed under an employer's
Yeah.
fits that is really important.
Kathleen, you described it. You just painted the picture. You named the dynamic, right? That's what we're trying to develop is you think of it as employees work within the community and the community can provide certain things, right? We want all people in our community to to be able to navigate the things. And each employee may need different, and may have different access needs to get to the things, right? We all have different things we need. And so I think your visual that you just painted is so accurate, and that it's like add capacity, but also providing that the space, providing the like the to even just to name it as an employee benefit makes it so that an employee says, yeah, okay, this is on the clock, right? Most of the time we are working with employees on the clock. They got a call, their childcare is closed tomorrow, and they need to figure out a plan. Have your resource coordinator help you identify some backups. Is there another solution we can put into play? And a lot of times we're working with employees that are asset limited or income constrained. And these are folks that you pull one thing away from the resource bucket, this whole thing is going to snowball if we don't get ahead of it. We're also working with a lot of essential workers who are, when we think of food and production and caregiving, you are hands-on in the work. And are you going to get a break to get to your computer? Do you have a computer at work? So to your point, Derek, earlier around what industries really need this kind of intervention, right? This idea of a benefit that really could be a measure of access for your people, that in other kinds of positions, it's built into the job. So this is our chance to really level that field and say, you know what? We understand your job. We know your job is demanding. Your breaks are not always clear. We don't always have that sort of stability around time. We manage time here in a certain way, but we want to make sure you can do the things that get you here, right? That help you to actually be in the work. So we're going to build that in. That's going to be built into your job just as we would in these other fields or these other sectors, right? And I've thought about that a lot, and the fact I have some capability now to work remotely. But our resource coordinators, they're walking production lines, they are in break rooms, they are in spaces with people who are working with their hands and are maybe in physically demanding positions that are really, at the end of the day, they need that access because it'll be about just doing the things that help them to come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, we all need that space to plan and organize. And if we are caught in the tyranny of the moment constantly, we will never be able to get ahead. It's another question I like to ask groups. Who do you go to plan, to talk about your action plan for the week? Who do you go to talk about your day the next day? Who do you tell, oh, yep, I'm working this and I got to go do this? Do you have someone you can talk to about that? Who do you go to? Do you have family? Do you have friends? And even family and friends sometimes is a little tricky, let's be honest. But
Yeah.
if you,
Totally.
but like, who do you trust? Who do you have in your corner? And I think that's a high value thing. We have to think about that these days, right? Because that connection with someone you trust who can help you with your plan, or just to listen, right? And create that space in your day. It's, I don't know, it's valuable. I'd like more of that in my life.
Oh, absolutely. And I think increasing people don't have a person, like
Yeah.
now more than ever, someone may not have that person, or the person they would normally go to for that is themselves maybe drowning in problems. And so I don't want to put my burden on my fiance or my mom because she's already having a lot of problems of her own. So, like, where do you go? And the answer is
And
times nowhere.
and family and friends will always have their opinions, right? They have skin in the game. And you do want someone in your corner who is absolutely unbiased and who really purely just wants you to be okay,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And so valuable because I even see that in your personal life, when you think about the things you share with your family. And the family they know you for a long time. They think they know you. It can be hard to grow in those spaces because sometimes a fresh new perspective will help you grow. And
Absolutely.
so much of what happens with employees is about stages of change and growth and growing through something. And people decide to grow or not, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when you have to meet a new person and build new relationship, there's growth. It's almost automatic, right? Anyway, yeah, that's a whole nother curiosity of mine.
Oh, absolutely. That's
How
a
do you
whole
grow?
other podcast episode in itself, right? That's
You know?
and it's so interesting, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
I was gonna say when you were saying talking about I think a lot of people sometimes don't grow because they only surround themselves with the people they've always have, and they're not met with new ideas or challenges or things like that, but they don't realize it. And then maybe they do get to an in a workplace where they have different ideas, different people around, and then they do grow. But what I wanted to also bring up, and it's going back a little bit now because you mentioned it, and you also like perfect quote to sum things up by you, not in this podcast, but when we were talking the last time we spoke, was
Yeah.
that pulling it together enough to show up for work is a privilege for so many. So
Yeah.
this direct quote from Connie last time that I just think pulls together everything that Working Bridges does and your kind of like outlook on life as well. If you want
Yeah.
to just talk a little bit about that'd be awesome.
I have been thinking that way. That this does sum up that statement that I've been observing and watching, just thinking and watching and seeing how there's an employee actually. And so maybe the story is that the employee that this was a few years back, an employee I was working with who was a single parent, but then had lost their children to state custody and was going through significant housing instability and mental health struggles. And in my mind, I thought that this was likely not someone who would continue to work. This was someone who was probably going to have to fall out of the workforce because of the things happening. I thought, yeah, this I even started thinking this could be insurmountable. This could that right now. This is not a maybe work right now isn't the thing. Maybe that's what's going to happen here. And I kept showing up every week and she kept showing up every week. And I thought, my gosh, how every day she'd walk through that door and I thought, how? It was a question. And she kept coming in and she would bring in her mail and we would look at her letters and figure out what her next steps were around her children. And she was living in her car and we would fill out housing applications together. And she would bring in her paycheck and we would talk about how much money she had and what her plan was to do, what was she doing with that money and what her thoughts were. Her family wasn't in her life. There were very few things around her. And so I kept saying to myself, "How?" And then it clicked the day that she came in and she had a big smile on her face because she'd gotten notice that her housing there was a unit available to her and that it would be subsidized, so she was, like, moving in a direction of stability, and she had a smile on her face, and I still c in my head, I remember thinking, "Oh, I get it now. I get it. This is your stability. This" so work was the stability. The outside world was where everything was chaos. And in that moment, I started to take note. I said, wow, okay, so I get it. Her employer provides her with the kind of workplace support that meets her need that she can't get anywhere else. She's not stopping to get these resources in community because her work is full time and she's living in her car. She's Her supervisor was was a key person in this and was able to support her needs and mentor her in ways that I think what I started to see the supports in the workplace that were working for her. And what I started to realize was she was doing everything she could to get herself to that job because ultimately she was getting more out of that job than she could get out in the world. She was seeing it as her path. It was her path. She was going to make it work for herself. And I watched her succeed and grow, get housing and get visits back with her kids. So these were like she was moving. And I think watching that happen, I recognize that when people have housing stability, when they have secure transportation options that are stable and consistent, when they have healthy relationships in their families and in their communities, when they have the supports around them, whether it's health and mental health, supports for just really navigating the hard parts of life, people then you can be your best at work, right? And so in my mind, I thought, wow, so all of those things, you want all of those things to be in play for your employees. And I look around and I think, I even look at my colleagues and I'm like, wow, we have such privilege because I bet if we sat down, I could say, so we have the things that help us to walk in through the door, to be able to put gas in the car, to get to the workplace. I can do those things. And I think back to her and I thought, and she still did the things. And these days, some of these systems aren't showing up for our workers in ways that we really need. And I think some days, I think our safety nets have maybe not kept pace in ways that really can, and maybe it's also, and there's bigger than that too, our systems, right? And costs, our inflation and the challenges of our world right now, I think have made it so that some of those essential resources are continuing to be out of reach, and it undermines the worker, right? Like it undermines those employees who are so scrappy and resilient and will still get to the job and will still try their darndest. And sometimes they'll have 1 and 2 jobs, right? And so I don't know, I reflect on that and I think about taking stock of what it takes to be a worker. And there's a whole nother podcast we could talk about with when you think about what it means in the US to be a worker and the sort of
Yep.
what's the trade there? What are the expectations set up in my mind? And when you think of, I'm going to give my work and my commitment to this job, and what do I believe are the safeties around that, the supports around that, or the expectations around that? And I talk a lot to the team here about FDR's Economic Bill of Rights, and which is really dynamic to look at and then to think about. In that Bill of Rights, FDR outlined what the American worker could expect in return for their labor, which is really beautiful things like education and healthcare and a stable unemployment system and Social Security, disability, so that when you are sick, you can still take care. And these systems that really were supposed to be the framework for being a worker with sort of those to level that and say, we have some resources to bear here that are going to help everyone to get into this workforce, right? That this is going to be the catalyst to help workers do the thing. But we've not really tended to those systems. I don't know that that's where the system issues, I think, are starting to show, right? Where we've not necessarily kept our eye on those systems and the need of the workers and the conditions in which we're all living. And it's funny because people have lots of opinions about that. And it's for me, it's more curiosity of what haven't we kept up with, and do we still need to keep up with it? Like, what could we do away with? What are some of the things that are no longer relevant? What does this workforce need now? How are people working and how are people finding their way to economic opportunity? How are they getting into the economy? And how are these systems? We saw that during COVID when we had the challenges of our unemployment system, right? And that idea of how are you supporting folks who maybe aren't going through some of the channels, and it just showed the system. It showed us really clearly the system we're in. And I think there's probably a whole series of podcasts we could do about the systems in which work happens and what's it like to be an employee in the world where these systems are sometimes hindering or maybe creating these unintended consequences to participation in the workforce.
Yeah.
Like this is where policy wonks, I think, could spend a lot of time thinking through what we didn't think about, or like, where are we now and what was the outcome of that? And we actually didn't mean for that to happen. So we need to do some renovation. Or so where are we now with that? I don't know. I think of what would it be like to have coffee with FDR today? What would his perspective be? Totally different time, right? Totally different world. When you think back to the time at which FDR was leading this country in World War II, it's so like apples to oranges. But
Sure.
if only I could have some time with him here, I'd be curious to get his insights. Or what would it be like today if he was to look at the labor needs and our workforce needs, and would he be aghast? Would he say, "What have we done?" Or would he say, "Wow, there's such opportunity now that I couldn't have imagined"? I suspect he would say that. I think he'd say, "My goodness, I couldn't have imagined these things. Now, what are we going to do about it?" Or
Yeah.
I couldn't have imagined that this would be what happened. but now let's be proactive. Like, why not? Now is the
Yeah.
chance for us to actually do better. And we have so much work to do. I just want people to actually start talking about it. And I think
Yeah.
that's the part that we can do. Vermonters can talk about this. We have different opinions. And I think that will create healthy pathways forward. We just really need to be able to be in the room together.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that as a sort of a wrap up thought, but also definitely a lead into a whole other, I think we may end up having to do a series because there's so much here and it's so critical to look at for us, especially so far, we've talked to mostly employers directly, but there's the bigger picture. And I think
Yeah.
you're filling in so much of it. So there's so much we can get to and we will get to in future conversations. But just for time today, Connie, so thankful for you coming and sharing all of this. And thank you for the work you do because it's clearly has a huge impact. But really appreciate you taking the time and we appreciate having you on.
Thank you for this conversation. And I just love this space with you to think through what is often on my mind. And so thank you for the time. Thanks for inviting me and having me. And I look forward to those future conversations.
Yeah, awesome.
To the
Thanks so much,
contrary.
Connie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Oh my goodness, Kathleen. I'm so glad that you brought Connie on. That was just an incredible conversation.
Yeah, I loved it. There's so much there. There's so many important things that I think employers can learn from it.
Yes, absolutely. It opens up the perspective. We've talked a lot about training and leadership development and a lot from that angle within the organization, but this really helped shift the lens to look beyond just as an employer in your immediate scope, but all the other things that affect your employees' ability to come to work every day, which
Yeah.
is not easy for everyone.
And there's so many resources out there for people, but how hard is it to figure out where those resources are, what is available to whom, and to have it all come from one place to be able to like have connect with working bridges, utilize them for your employees, and then have access to all those outside things. Like, wow, like how concise.
Yeah, absolutely. Tying those all, if you were an employer trying to do that all yourself, not to mention when it's not like a third party doing some of that, it's harder for employees to trust sometimes when it's an employer, it's like their internal HR team. I know HR teams always struggle with this, right? That they're treated like the policy enforcers rather than the people that are trying to help them. And so having a third party that's a partner in there just opens it up, I think, a lot more too.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you want to go first with your shifting question, Derek, or should I?
You know what? I'll talk first.
I knew you wanted to.
Yeah, I think I'll see if I can tee up one for something and then you can jump on it. But yeah, I mean, there's so many good ones and I think it's hard to narrow it down, but the one focused on like, where can you start today if you listen to this conversation and the wheels are turning, but it's also, I don't know if I'm ready to go reach out to an organization like United Way's Working Bridges, but there's the first step is taking inventory, right? What do you have in your business today? What are you offering your employees today? And more importantly, and the specific question is, what are your employees not taking advantage of today? And why might that be? I think so many employers, I think Kathleen, like back to our time when we worked together at our last company, I remember going onto one of the benefits websites, like after we'd been there for 2 years and then realizing, wait a minute, they have all of these other things that I had no idea about. And starting with that inventory and thinking full spectrum. It's not just like health benefits. There's other things, which frankly are often more cost effective, the financial literacy piece, the mental health piece, et cetera. And so what are you offering today? And how can you get employees to better utilize that?
I love that one. I love it. That's so important to take inventory. You said you had a second question though.
Okay. I do have a little bit of a second question too.
Okay. Allow it. Just this
Former small business hat and I used to be very conscious. And so as a business owner, as we were listening to this, I couldn't help but think, okay, but well, how would I justify this in terms of the return, right? How much is it going to cost? And then like, how am I going to track that? And I think there's direct savings
Mhm.
from a program like this and then indirect savings. The direct savings, you think about how much you invest in a person to hire them, to train them, to mentor them, coach them, however long they've been in the company. If you lose someone because they literally can't find a housing, and then they can't, because of that, it throws off their whole life and they can't come to work, you've just lost that money that you're going to then have to incur to hire someone and train someone else. So there's direct, but then there's also the indirect return, which is what does that do for overall employee morale and overall employee loyalty? Because I think one of the things that consistently shows up in employer surveys, et cetera, is employees really value staying at companies that really show care beyond just that paycheck.
Yeah.
So
That's wow. That's an incredible one. There's so many indirects that I can think of. I wish I could write them all down and list them here for for employers. But then another aspect of the direct that you didn't mention is, say someone needs help, is struggling with transportation to get to work, and they need a new car, and Connie and her team are able to procure a loan for them at a good rate, or a grant to get them some money to be able to buy a used car or whatnot. Numbers wise, and I can't give exact numbers of what Connie's fees are
the
because
program,
she
yep.
said we'll meet you, everyone's different, and we'll meet you in the middle and stuff like that. But just that right there in my mind is, those numbers are probably remarkably similar, if not the loan that they is procured for your employee is probably more than what you're paying for an entire year for maybe all your employees, and then times that by all the employees that they help, and the help that they do that can't be quantified as well, like mental health work that is priceless, right? Because it's someone's life. I think there's so much ROI. We could probably talk about this for an hour.
Yeah, but you're right. Like the framing of like just one intervention probably pays for itself. And
Exactly.
then everything else is a positive net return. Not to mention the feel good return. It feels good if you're an employer and you actually feel like you're taking care of people. So,
Absolutely. Is it time for my shifting question?
it is time. I would love to know your shipping.
My shifting question is around a really great quote from Connie. I mentioned it during the podcast, but she's the one that came up with the quote before, when we spoke before we recorded. She said, pulling it together to show up for work is a privilege for many people. And so my question around that is, do all of your employees have the things they need to show up for work? I don't know that we all think about it that way because it is a privilege, right? We don't take that into consideration. So do they have transportation, housing, childcare? Do they have mental health together and ready to go for the day? And then how do you help them now? How can you help them more? I know this might sound a little bit like yours of taking inventory of what you offer, but I think thinking about these things in a few different ways is really important.
Yeah, you're right. I think yours is the opposite side, the other side of the coin. It's an employer's, what are you offering today?
Yeah.
And then what you're really getting at is what do your employees actually need? And that's where, yeah, you might have some misalignment as well, right? Maybe you're focusing on a 401k, but employees cannot find affordable housing, and so they can't save anything anyway. And so I think that's a great sort of tie-in. It's such a good conversation, I think, in terms of really zooming out a little bit and reminding employers to like these are the things that I think when you're an operator, you're focused on just the things in your control in the day-to-day of the business. And so thinking about training programs and leadership development within the organization is
Yeah.
really important. But when you really think about long term, how do you invest in people? How do you become a really great employer? It's thinking about that broader community and about your employees' whole lives rather than just
Yes.
their life at work.
Yep. And then that'll make you an employer that your employees want to show up to work for.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the thing that makes all of the other things more effective, right? You want to have an effective training program. You want to have all these other programs to get employees engaged. They have to be able to show up to work in the headspace to do that, right?
Absolutely.
So
It actually reminds me of it, immediately reminded me of a quote, and I couldn't figure out where it was from for a second, and then I realized it's from Anthony.
oh, in our last conversation, yeah.
If you pour into us, we'll pour into you, and vice versa. I think it relates here.
Yeah, amen. Love the tie back, the callback. So many, like truly, I do think we will do multiple parts of that conversation. And there's a bigger ecosystem isn't quite the right word, right? But that bigger picture, like rounding out what does it mean to create the environment for people to be able to show up for work is so important. So love that. But for now, thanks for coming to work with us.
Now.
Bye for now.